Hey Frizzle flock! So, there's another part to this video. You don't have to watch them in any particular order, but if you would like to hear my thoughts on such juicy topics, such as Murderbot's relationship with trust issues and the like, go check out my other video on this. But the general point of these videos is that Network Effect by Martha Wells is a masterpiece, and we are taking it apart one line of subtext at a time, by topic. I want to take a quick intermission to talk about little random things that I really loved about the subtext in this book that won't fit into other categories. One of which is the way Murderbot always separates humans and augmented humans when it's making lists. And I wonder and kind of doubt if the humans also make this distinction. I feel like for humans it's just like, hey, we're all people, and some of us are augmented with electronics and some of them less. But you don't hear the humans in these stories really referring to them as groups of humans, augmented humans. It's just all together and then people with augments. Which makes me wonder how Murderbot got this distinction in its head. There are lots of different possible explanations, but my favorite one is connected to the concept of feed voices, which I also have some elaboration on with Murderbot. Because people often chat back and forth across their message system, the feed, the comms, whatever. And the feed seems to be mostly a text communication thing that they do with each other. And yet, in order to get that text, they either interface with an augment directly in their heads, or they'll say the word subvocally out loud. And so, tone gets into this message somehow. And so Murderbot will say that their feed voice sounded agitated, or this, or that, or you could tell who it was from their feed voice. And possibly, Murderbot is picking up on the subtle differences in the feed voice between a human and augmented human, because they're accessing the feed in different ways, and probably their feed voices have slightly different relationships. Which brings me to my question that I've been speculating on for a long time, which is, what does Murderbot's feed voice sound like? Because Murderbot is more connected to the feed than any of these augmented humans are. And so I feel like, at least theoretically, Murderbot's feed voice could have way more emotion in it than the average human. But also, you could argue that Murderbot didn't learn to put emotion into its communications. That Murderbot, in fact, was trained kind of not to, just to pretend to be an unfeeling robot. And so, Murderbot's feed voice might be incredibly flat. Or, I guess, anywhere in between. But I would love to lean towards usually flat, but occasionally with patches of incredible emotion when it wants to put it in. And before we jump into that juicy relationship, I want to take a quick sideline to a scene in this book which is important and showcases the Secunit trauma a little bit better. Because in chapter 13, the team finds a dead Secunit. And Secunits, like Murderbot used to be, are slaves, with chips in their heads that explode if they disobey orders. And so, these lovable cyborgs have a lot of trauma and very bad situation, etc. And this shows up in this book in little pockets. Like when Murderbot sees that someone has graffitied over a company logo on the wall. I know, it's a logo, but I hate it when humans and augmented humans ruin things for no reason. Maybe because I was a thing before I was a person, and if I'm not careful, I could be a thing again. And Murderbot disliking logos and graffiti and various things like this show up in these little red flags of, hey, Murderbot has some baggage that it's carrying, but this comes head to head when they find the dead Secunit, killed by its governor module because it was no longer complying with the correct parameters. And the humans are appalled and confused. But how did it die? Amina asked in a small voice. Oh wait, now I know why I hadn't wanted to talk about this. Because this is too fresh of a reminder of the life of fear, of pain of death that Murderbot lived under for so long. Are you all right? I was absolutely great. It wasn't like the situation needed to get any more emotionally fraught or anything. I said, I am functioning optimally. This was a line from Valorous Defenders, which is a great source for things humans and augmented humans think Secunits say. The Secunits do not actually say. Murderbot doesn't want to confront the idea that this could have been it. It's very aware of this fact. Does it want to talk about it? No. Because it's not yet comfortable with that fact. It hasn't really come to terms with the way that it was treated before. Even in the flashbacks, as Murderbot is getting interviewed and counseled, we've talked a little about trauma recovery treatments. I wonder if you've ever thought about taking one yourself. Session redacted. Murderbot avoids it like the plague, does not want to talk about its feelings, does not want to talk about it, it just wants to bottle it up and avoid this fact that it does need some trauma recovery treatments, that it does need more healthy friendships. And after this tense moment with the humans over the dead Secunit, the other humans were listening on the comm so hard I could pick up their breathing. All the humans are aware of this hot-button topic. All humans are aware of how messed up Murderbot is, but Murderbot doesn't really want to admit that either. The humans are enraged on Murderbot's behalf for how it was treated. When they're talking about it using skills, it says, it was from the time it was working for, enslaved by the company. And Murderbot avoiding this topic goes down to it being an unreliable narrator when it comes to this topic. One of the funniest and most enlightening sentences in the book is when Murderbot's friend is again in that interview talking to Murderbot, is talking about Murderbot's past life being owned by the company, and says to Murderbot, but whenever the company is mentioned, you edit out the company and change it to the company. And so we see Murderbot actively taking out the name of the company that it worked under because it doesn't want to admit it. We still don't know the name for this company. When I was first reading these books, I kind of assumed that it was just called The Company because it was such a monolith monopoly company that there was no other company, and so its name was just The Company. But no, in fact, this is Murderbot actively editing the narrative because it doesn't want to admit even the name of the thing that owned it before. And as Murderbot is coming out of that slavery it is wrestling with in all of the books, but also this book, the idea of self-determination, of being your own agent, of making decisions and not having it enforced by someone else. I feel like one of Murderbot's catchphrases is, self-determination sucks sometimes. Because, yeah, decisions are hard sometimes. Sometimes I wish people would just make decisions for me. But also, I like making my own decisions. Murderbot describes it first breaking out as, my first realization had been, the governor module's gone and I can do whatever I want. My second realization, what do I want? I've been stuck on that question for a long time. And part of this beautiful character arc in Network Effect is Murderbot kind of figuring out what it wants. At the end of the book, it says, preservation was the first place I was part of, and I don't want to not be a part of it. But I like being with art. I want to keep being with it. And though we've seen Murderbot express lots of times throughout the books different things that it wants, this is like such a strong declaration of what it really wants. Mensa replies, the good thing is, you do know what you want. I sort of did know. It was a weird feeling. That's new. And it's a weird good feeling because it means not only that Murderbot has broken free, but that it has broken free through the knowledge of what it is. And we can see how important this knowledge of knowing itself is to Murderbot. As it's arguing with art over whether or not to copy itself into a sentient virus, software, etc. plot things, the conversation goes down like this. Art was quiet for another 3.4 seconds. Then it said, for being as sophisticated as you are, it is baffling how little understanding you have of the composition of your own mind. Now I was getting more pissed off. I know my composition, that's why I'm sitting here arguing and not stuck in a cubicle. Because Murderbot, knowing its own mind, knowing itself, is a point of pride for Murderbot, because that is how it got out of slavery in the first place. That is how it was able to travel around the galaxy, going on adventures by itself. That is how it's able to make these decisions more than just a programmed bot would. And that is how it can make friends. Which finally brings us around to our regularly scheduled topic of art and its relationship with it. I feel like we need better pronouns, but this is all we got for all these robots and sentient spaceships as art is. So Art and Murderbot became best friends back in book 2, where they kind of accidentally rammed into each other's orbits, became fast friends, went on adventures, collaborated for a murder, etc., and parted ways. And this was such a big deal because neither of them had really had a friend before like this. Murderbot had had the humans from book 1 that it had mostly befriended, but then abandoned. And Art absolutely adores its human crew, but we saw in book 2 that it also kind of struggles to understand human communication. It can't watch TV without someone filtering and interpreting for it. And that might also be like data inputs differently, but you know what I mean. Art is not exactly a social snowflake. So when Murderbot and Amina are kidnapped by the evil guys onto a spaceship and discover, hey, this is Art, but Art has been deleted. The sentience is gone, the programming bot pilot is disappeared. Murderbot does not take this well. Murderbot slowly takes it less and less well, in fact. And Murderbot goes ballistic on these enemies that are in the ship and claiming to have killed its best friend. And the tone of this scene is kind of masterful because it's so calm and detached in so many ways. It's like Murderbot is in shock. It gets so graphic as it's fighting these targets of it. It didn't have a sharp edge, but I made do and ripped a large hole. Then I used the weapon, and the large hole, to lift target 2 and slam it into the upper bulkhead 3 times. Because in this point in the narrative, Murderbot still hasn't admitted to itself that the reason for this drop, for this emotional breakdown, is because it's mourning for its best friend. My performance reliability had leveled out at 89%. Not great, but I could work with it. I still hadn't identified the source of the drop. But Amina helps it come back around through giving it someone to protect and watch out for. And I talk more about that in my other video. But then, of course, Art gets rebooted, comes back to life, and now we learn the more you love someone in the beginning, the more that love can get fueled into hate and resentment and frustration. Because Murderbot is incredibly all of those with Art, who it has now realized kidnapped it and put all of its other friends in danger in order to do so. So Murderbot is incredibly rude to Art. Art takes offense at this and is now mad back at Murderbot. As a human crew member says, anyone who thinks machine intelligences don't have emotions needs to be in this very uncomfortable room right now. So some snippets of their more entertaining fights and some commentary on them. Art said, "I want an apology. I made an obscene gesture at the ceiling with both hands. You are not here against your will. Leave whenever you want. You know where the door is." Which is funny because they're in outer space at the time. And here we also see that a lot of these arguments that they're making back and forth is relying on the computer memory of them having perfect recall of all the fights that have gone before, which just makes it harder for them to forgive each other because they can just easily play back how the other one insulted them a little bit earlier. Like earlier, Murderbot expressed the type of sentiments like, "I'm not going to talk to you, Art, because you're not my client." And then later, when Art is trying to make up with Secunit, when Art is trying to make this relationship better, it says, "I don't need your help. That's not what you thought when you kidnapped me," I told it. "I meant, you don't have to speak to me if you don't want to." Because Art is trying to relieve that pressure of making it like a client relationship. Art is trying to agree, like, yeah, I'm not your client, and you don't have to talk to me if you don't want to, but please do talk to me because I want to be your friend. And so we see that Art is making a big effort to see things from Murderbot's point of view, and when Murderbot finally considers things from Art's point of view, that's when it finally gives them the fuel that they need to really make up. It hit me that Art had been desperate and terrified. It had tricked its captors into taking it to me, not because it had some kind of grand strategy, but because it needed me. I hate emotions. And thus, the friendship is renewed. But even if they have a friendship, they're both a little unsure of what to do with it, even to the point where Murderbot doesn't even want to call it a friendship. So Rati calls it a relationship, and Murderbot says, "Do you have to call it a relationship?" Rati shrugged one shoulder. "You don't like the word friendship, what else is there?" I had no idea. I did a quick search on my archives and pulled the first result. Mutual administrative assistance? And so they do not have a friendship, they have a mutual administrative assistance pact. But it's a friendship, and it's adorable, and I'm so excited for it to develop more as Murderbot joins the Perihelion team. Because they genuinely care about each other and trust each other. You can even see this when Art gifts Murderbot with a new set of clothes. It had Art's crew logo on the jacket, but somehow that didn't bother me as much as usual. Because between them, it's not a sign of ownership, it's just a sign of friendship. Or I guess it's a sign of a little bit of the ownership that comes with any friendship. And they just kind of love each other. And they express that love through watching out for each other, for really trying to help. No one had ever rescued me before except Dr. Mensa when she went into the Deltfell habitat after me. And Art had been willing to wipe a colony off a planet for me. And then later, when Art invites Murderbot to join its crew pretty permanently to continue on missions, Murderbot says, "I don't think your humans are going to like that. I will discuss it with them." I didn't say anything. I didn't even make a crack about Art's idea of a discussion and forcing everyone else to do what it wanted, which we all know is how that discussion would in fact go down. So, where will their relationship go now? I am excited to see. And I'm also excited how there seemed to be a little bit of foreshadowing that Amina was also going to join Art's crew, as she was looking into that at the end of the book. And there are, of course, many other plotlines that I'm looking forward to, including Secunit 3, which they recently rescued, and its development. I would definitely read a novella from its perspective, too. I think that'd be really interesting, especially if it was interacting with characters we already knew. Ditto for pretty much all the characters in these books. If you made it to the end of the video, comment with a robot emoji, and let me know what you think of all of this. Do you like this book? Do you not? And thank you so much for watching.